Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm your host, Connor King Roberts, with another episode of the Pivot Podcast, where we interview business leaders and entrepreneurs across multiple industries. Today, I'm excited to introduce a special guest, Gary Acevedo, the founder of Rise Leadership Group, and he's been in the industry for over 40 years. Gary, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We're
Thank
excited.
you.
Of
Yeah, I
course.
appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. And I know you and I spoke a little bit about this before we kick things off, but if you wouldn't mind giving our listeners a 2 to 3 minute breakdown of what you do and who you serve, that would be awesome, please.
Yeah, you betcha. We have a breakthrough process that helps leaders create miracles. Like it helped Mark Hughes create Herbalife. It helped Ron and Joseph bring 12 million people out of poverty using microloans around the world. And it helped Burt Bonnell, whose company today saves hundreds of premature babies' lives every day. And so the way I came to this breakthrough process was when I was a young man, I was brilliant, I was talented, I could pretty much do anything, but I was so emotionally lost
Mm.
that uh, I was blessed that I found Mel Wasserman. I moved into his community, and I had no idea until many years later that he was literally generations ahead of his time.
Mm.
And so in my first breakthrough, like they had me reprogram a deep barrier. And it was like getting on an elevator in my consciousness, getting higher and higher and higher and higher. And it kept going up and then and and in that moment I saw the truth of who I am, my highest self. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had always looked for, and that I was now filled to the brim with it. I knew that I was free, and that people in the quote real world don't have a clue what that experience is like.
Mm.
And my first thought was, what if I could share this with people? So that's how I came to creating the business that I have.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean that within itself and sharing that with people, that is a superpower. But I'm gonna ask you,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
if you had to define what your superpower or unique skill or insight is that
yeah.
sets you apart in your space, what would you say that is?
Yeah, because of an extraordinary experience, I was given a much higher level of perception.
Mhm.
And for an example, I can see the next 4 or 5 years of someone's life, and I can tell them if they're headed for a blessing or a lesson. And out of this experience and a much higher level of perception, I can see through the eyes of unconditional love, or what I call Christ-like love.
Mhm.
And I had a profound experience where I realized that human beings don't have hang-ups. Everything that people criticize themselves for is ultimately a great gift, strength, or talent in disguise. And so when I wrote my book, I put like, what's the great gift, strength, or talent behind being overly critical or anxiety or depression or being overweight? And, you know, um, it was great to suddenly realize that human beings are perfect. And so that transformed my entire process. Like one of the frameworks that we use that gets better results than my competitors is that I do the breakthrough process that I described that I went through. I do that process at the retreat we call the awakening.
Mhm.
And I've learned how to get an audience so lifted and touched and moved and inspired that they are literally in awe. They look like deer in the headlights, you
Yeah.
know? So then the second full day, I do the first breakthrough as a demonstration, and I'll say, okay, who wants a breakthrough? And the strong people stand up. And I say, okay, what do you want a breakthrough on? Love, money, And within about 25 or 30 minutes, there's hardly a dry eye in the house, and everyone in that room is crystal clear that that person's life will never be the same.
Yeah.
It's actually obvious.
That's incredible. And do you do that through asking really good and insightful questions, or
Well, there's
how?
a whole series of tools that when I took Mel Wasserman's process, I evolved it, and eventually it became a script and something that after people do my retreat, if they want to learn how to do that process, then they can do, we do something at Lava Hot Springs and we teach them how to do this breakthrough process.
Got it. And what do you feel like a lot of people are doing to get themselves into these, I guess, emotional states? Like, is there anything that causes people to feel, I don't know, just like there's some sort of inner turmoil, um, that you've seen in your experience?
Well, you can't be human without having barriers,
Mhm.
obstacles, challenges. And so, because what I learned from my first mentor, who was so ahead of his time, we go below the surface and, we get people to absolutely transform those barriers.
Yeah.
And, you know, something else I do for business owners and high performers specifically is that if they have a vehicle that can really take off and fly, then I do what's called percentage coaching. So, like, I took a millionaire from 1 million a year to 8 million a year by plugging up the holes in his love life. And I took another guy from 250,000 a year to like 80, 100,000 a month. And of course, when I do these things, um, I don't take on somebody as a percentage coach unless they're willing to really be dedicated to their own inner game.
Got it.
If they really are, then okay, I can work with them if they have that kind of a vehicle.
Gotcha. And, over the last 40 years, how important would you say that networking or just, meeting people, meeting the right people at the right times has been, how important would you say that has been for your success?
Well, it's important for everybody's success,
Mhm.
but one of the things I'm most proud of in my work is what we do for families.
Yeah.
I mean, marketing is important for everybody, but you know, when I started working with people who had the ability to really increase their income, I found out two magical tools that worked to help them take off was take recess 2 to 3 times a day. I mean, you can't believe how much people increase their success by taking 10 to 15 minutes, couple of 3 times a day, and putting the clutch in and getting out of their day, getting out of the stress, and focusing on anything that makes their heart sing. It's an incredible tool. The
Yeah.
second tool is I have them fill the emotional cups of their family. Like, you cannot do our retreat and not have it have a profound effect on your family. Matter of fact, the greatest key to manifest your vision is higher purpose. And at the retreat, I spend a whole day teaching them the art and the science of how to connect your to do tasks with your dream and your vision and then your highest purpose. It takes a whole day to get the art and science of that across because it is literally the greatest key to manifest somebody's vision.
Yeah. And how frequently do you do your retreats?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How frequently do you do your retreats?
Um, Ever since COVID, we've done it once a year. Before that, we would do it 2 or 3 times a year, but things have been a little tougher since COVID. But
Sure.
it's great we can't wait to get back to it because it's such a miracle.
Yeah, absolutely. So when a client finds you for the very first time, obviously not one size fits all. Everybody has their own stories and own things that they're dealing with. So what does the beginning of your process look like for figuring out where they're at and then adjusting accordingly with what you're going to walk them through and teach them?
Well, you're right, everybody's different. But one of the things I like to start off with, I call the greatest key to influence.
Mm,
In my I have Utah's #1 relationships course, and in that course I make a strong point that the greatest key to influence is to recognize and to speak to one's highest nobility.
mm,
And so I often start my work with somebody by giving them what you might call a higher self reading, where I recognize what their greatest gifts, strengths, and talents are. And
mhm,
that creates rapport and it creates safety. You know, one of the problems with people in my industry is that a lot of trainings out there are still confrontational. And I had a profound experience when I was working with some of the world's greatest therapists
mhm,
in LA. And when I saw that human beings don't have hangups, that human beings are perfect, I took all the confrontation out of my workshops and I started focusing on what's right with people. And it's fascinating because I'd been doing what I'd been doing for probably a couple of decades. But when I took all that out and I focused on what's right with people, I saw miracles that I had never seen before. I had people um, healing like physical
mhm.
things, it was amazing. So the awakening, the retreat that I do is kind of the pinnacle of that process. Like I've immersed myself in like 30 different disciplines in my field of personal empowerment, like NLP that Tony Robbins does and
Yeah.
hypnosis and all kinds of stuff. And I love watching the awakening retreat because I've never seen an atmosphere, a space that gets that high, that touch, moved, lifted, inspired. And when people get to those higher states of being, what happens is their life can transform in an instant.
Yeah. And I guess how often are you seeing your typical clients? Are you meeting with them once
Well,
a week?
we do workshops every month,
Mm,
different topics like the pinnacle of presentations, which I did for AT&T, or success in all relationships. There's an innovation that came out of Gestalt therapy we do called empowerment dialogue. There's a workshop every month,
yeah.
and um, and then I work with people privately when they want to work with me privately. Um, and with the percentage clients, I only work a few at a time because they really get a lot of my
y-
attention.
Yeah.
I'm solving their problems when I'm in the shower, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You
You're
know,
you're thinking about it,
yeah, yeah,
all day.
yeah, because they do good, I do good.
Mhm.
It's like that.
Love that. And how are clients finding you these days? Is it a mixture of your own marketing with referrals, with people that you've helped in the past and you did a great job and they'll send
Yeah,
friends, families, colleagues?
typically, people come and do something with us and they love it, so they start telling all their friends and family and like that. And then we do some social media, I'm on LinkedIn and different places, you know. And I love doing speaking engagements because I have a lot of people say, "Well, you come and speak to my group," and I love doing that because that always gets people excited to, give it a shot and see what they can do, that kind of thing.
Certainly. Gotcha. And is there anything that comes to mind for you where you wish, your clients could peer behind the curtain for a day and just see something that you do on a daily basis or like behind the scenes?
Well, I'm noticing that with a lot of the leaders that I'm working with, they're finally coming to realize that money is not enough,
Mm.
that they really want to make a difference for this planet. And so, I mean, when I train trainers, I teach them over 100 tools for how to inject a little more subconscious safety into an audience. Like, I found out that the greatest tool that any presenter has, whether it's a fifth grade teacher or a Fortune 500 CEO, the greatest tool that any presenter has is called the space of a room. It's
Mm.
that emotional atmosphere, you know, the the atmosphere that's invisible, that gets people leaning forward in their chairs, you know, laughing at the jokes. And if you can inject more subconscious safety into the room, the atmosphere goes like that, you know?
Yeah.
And so when I teach trainers from other companies or people who want to be coaches or healers or facilitators, I take them through a lot of those kind of tools so they understand how to really affect and influence people.
Gotcha. And then obviously over the last 40 years, I'm sure there's been a lot of ups and then also some downs along the way. So is there a challenge that comes to mind when you were, building the company? If so, what did you learn from that experience?
Well, like you're saying, there's been, you know, tons of challenges along the way. If you're human, you have those. Um, but I think the great thing that I learned out of some of those challenges, like there's been times when I was starting off where the company would crash and, you know, I'd have to start over. And, you know, the thing that I learned that I think is the one thing that I would share with anybody is that your circumstances are not a function of anything outside of you.
Mm.
Until you learn how to manage your states of being, your consciousness, you simply keep repeating the same challenges, the same subconscious emotional recordings. It's like you're perfectly designed to get the results you are now getting. If you want a new result, you need to redesign you. That was probably the best thing I learned from all the different challenges that I went through over the years.
Certainly. And, without you giving up the secret sauce, of course, what is, one technique that we can use to rewire the way that we think, whether it's like those subconscious thoughts that we have, limiting beliefs. I'm sure a lot goes into that, but if something comes to mind.
Well, actually, you know, I have a program called Movement to Mastery. It's like a 10-month program. And they have to choose one dream, you know, only one dream at a time. We found out if they focus on one thing at a time, then a lot of the other areas of their life take off.
Hmm.
And so, and you know, we have a whole, I mean, it's like the best support program I've ever seen. They have an amazing amount of support to keep focusing on their dreams. And so we give them a list of tools that they're going to learn throughout the program so they can always get out of the fear-based theater back into the love-based theater and keep moving toward their dream.
Hmm.
And I'll just give you the one that's at the top of that list because it actually is profound and simple. It's called hang up the phone. Like whenever you see yourself having a negative thought, it doesn't matter what it is, hang up the phone. Do not spend any time in negative thinking, you know? And what we teach them is when you have a negative thought, you take that thought, you put it in a separate room, and
Hmm.
then you talk to the little boy or girl inside of you, the one that is the one usually getting scared and creates negative thinking, you know? And you say certain things and you can even dialogue with that self so that you can actually move them out of that fear-based theater. But there's like we give them a page of about 10 different things that they can learn. They learn, to do recreation, which is don't want, do want, brainstorm, make it safe, commit, they have empowerment dialogue. They have a whole bunch of tools that they're going to learn through this program so that they can keep heading toward the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this course, this 10-month course, is this something that you built fully yourself? Do you have a
Yeah.
team that you're able
Well,
to?
because of all the courses I've done, all the disciplines I've studied, I take the stuff that I love the most and I evolve it and I put it in there and you know, um, so they actually get a lot of great stuff from a lot of different disciplines.
Mhm.
And of course, then I put it together and make it so that it makes sense and it works.
Yeah, gotcha. With on the same note as the hang up the phone, which I love that by the way, that's something that I'm going to implement today. I think that's really awesome. You were talking about how it's important to focus on the things that people like about themselves or that are good about themselves and then build off of that. And I think that is also unique because oftentimes we focus on what's wrong and then how do we fix it or like reframe it. But I guess what does that process look like for focusing on what's good and then building off of that?
Well, um, in most of my courses, at the end of the first night, we do a demonstration where we have somebody come up to the front of the room, a volunteer, and I let the whole group, which mostly they don't know this person, call out their biggest strengths, gifts, and talents, what they recognize. And the whole room is shocked. The person who hears it cannot believe that these people can see all this good stuff in me. And then we get them in small groups, and they do that for each other. They can't believe that they can see all this in other people and that people can see it in them. And so then we spend a lot of time showing people that you never ever want to criticize yourself. Never. You always want to focus on, like, what am I doing that works? What do I need to celebrate?
Mhm.
How do I focus on my successes? And then where I fell down or made a mistake or got egg on my face or blew it, then simply turn the movie back to the beginning and ask yourself, what do I wish I would have done differently? Like, this is really interesting. Do you know that you cannot be upset ever unless or until the moment that you betray your truth?
Hmm.
Until the instant that you give in, go along with, sell out, swallow it, don't speak, until you betray your own truth, you literally biologically can't even get upset. Every upset starts at the moment of self betrayal and it ends at the moment of making a commitment to honor your truth.
I did not know that. So for example, if I'm in a conversation or like an argument with someone, which I don't like to do. And then, let's say, for example, that I said something that I feel like I shouldn't have said and it doesn't align with like who I am, that those are grounds to be um, upset with yourself.
Well, in that case, I would say you need to apologize and clean up the mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a profound principle. But simple is never confused with easy.
Mm,
You know, I mean, I love the scene in the great movie called Peaceful Warrior, where the student says to the teacher, "Can we do this quickly?" Because sure, and he throws him off the bridge into the river below. And the kid comes up to me and goes, "You're crazy. You're out of your mind." And he looks at him and he says, "It's taken a lifetime." And that's the point. Like, when people get the idea that they want to get better at honoring their truth, that's not an overnight thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
They're going to keep working at it, working on it, and they're going to notice. I mean, like in our relationships course, I'm really great working with couples. And the greatest thing that kills a great relationship, a love life relationship, is putting up with. People sell out more in their relationships than anywhere else, usually, because it's
Mm,
important. And so they acquiesce and give in and go along with, and they're not even aware of how much they're selling out, and it depletes the emotional bank account. And so, like, the principle we teach is that until you stop putting up with what you're currently putting up with, you cannot get to higher ground.
yeah.
Where what you really want is actually waiting for you on a silver platter.
And when you say putting up with, does that go both ways in terms of like putting up with things that your partner's doing, then putting up with agreements that you're breaking within yourself, like maybe you're letting things go, like putting up
Yeah,
encompasses all of that.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Wow, I
I
love
mean,
that.
when we were 2 and 3 and 4 years old, we hardly put up with anything. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
But we had to learn. Oh, got to be like the big people.
yeah. Learn how to share and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Is there anything that if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago that you would do differently or impart some wisdom on yourself?
Yeah, I think I would say to myself, I mean, there's, of course, it would be 10, 20, 30, 40, it would be all the way along the line. But if it was just, say, 10 years ago, I would say get better at never criticizing yourself and always and get to where you learn how to love everything about yourself sooner.
Mm,
Like that was a recent revelation for me.
yeah.
Like I don't know how many months ago it was, but within the last year, I had this thought, and I couldn't tell if it was my voice or it said, I love everything about you.
Mhm.
And I instantly looked to see, do I believe that? And it was like, yes, I do. And so now I can go to anybody and say, sincerely, I love everything about you. And, most of my students, when I say that, they think I'm nuts. How can this person, you love the person next to me? Are you kidding? Yeah, I love because I have this higher level of perception and I can see, you know, I, that's the greatest gift I've ever been given spiritually is that I get to look through the eyes of unconditional love. And so I can see people's highest self and I can speak to their highest nobility. It's very easy. And so that's the greatest key to influence. So if you're like when leaders come to me who are in a company and they want to go up the ladder and stuff, I say I want you to get better at a process we call how to melt your favorite jerk, which is basically just feeding back to them the positive intention behind their negative behavior.
Mm.
But then I also want you to get really masterful at recognizing their highest self and speaking to it.
That's great. Definitely not easy, definitely not something that happens overnight, but I would imagine that if you're able to speak to someone's highest self, that they feel seen and they also feel that they need to let that self out and rise to that occasion.
And I
So it's
love in our
yourself.
community that everybody, because we do that like every meeting, every workshop, we do it all through the workshop and stuff. So after people have spent a bit of time with me, they get pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And it starts affecting their families, and I love that. That's what I love the most. Like I love it when a father and a daughter or a mother and a son come through the awakening. I've had whole families come through the retreat, and it's a miracle to watch what happens to those families.
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure that's extremely fulfilling.
Oh, it is.
And something that came to mind a little bit earlier, obviously you're doing deep work, whether it's psychologically, spiritually as well, is there a faith-based element in your teachings as well?
Well, you know, when I started my work, I intended for it to be psychological, and that was all. But I found out very quickly that when people get to higher states of being, it's it's impossible for them not to have experiences that they call spiritual, you
Hmm.
know? And so, I'll tell you, this is a really cute story. One time at my awakening, I had three different ministers. There was a Mormon bishop and there was a Lutheran. I can't remember, but there was like three different ministers in that retreat.
Wow.
And every one of them came up to me because the awakening is a space of love and light. I mean, it's just ecstatic. And every one of them came up to me and said, what we're experiencing here, this is what my faith is all about. All three of them. So, it's not a specific faith, it's just supports all faiths because
Gotcha.
love and light does that.
Gotcha. That's something that came to mind, so I was curious about that, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
incredible. And then, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it, where would you see yourself in the company in a perfect world 2 years from now?
I would have the awakening, the retreat be in every major city in the world so that, I mean, when we see the miracles that happen for kids from 9 years old on up, I mean, when a 9 or 10-year-old goes through a breakthrough and the 50-year-olds are watching, you can see that look on their face like, how would my life have been different if I could have gotten this then instead of now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the teenagers that come through my workshops and then are doing these phenomenal things with their lives. I mean, miracle stuff what they're doing with their lives. It's every time the awakening happens, I think it is a crime that this is not in every major city on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great goal. Absolutely. And I think a ton of people would benefit from that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Last couple of questions for you. What advice would you give to someone looking to follow in your footsteps, whether that's as an entrepreneur, consultant, or industry expert?
I would say work with me so that I can groom you for that. And that's actually something that's very much on my mind right now.
Mm,
Like with the time I have left, I want to groom as many leaders and healers and speakers and coaches. You know, I see myself as kind of like the Johnny Appleseed of healers,
yeah.
influencers. I mean, you know, when Ron and Joseph told me that they brought 12 million people out of poverty with microloans, and we were in front of the cameras, so it was all I could do not to burst into tears, realizing that I had anything to do with that. You know, there's
Hmm.
nothing like watching somebody get out of their fear based nonsense, out of their barriers, and then watch them do these great things that make a difference for people. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredibly special. Um, oh, yeah. And I guess last thing is, what is one thing you would want the viewers to take away from this interview, or one final thought or idea that you could impart?
It's what I said before that your life, your results that you're getting now have nothing to do with the circumstances, have nothing to do with what's outside of you. You are perfectly designed to get the results you are now getting. So if you want new results, you need to redesign in here. You need to rework your pictures, thoughts, and feelings so that you match the results that you want. I would say that's number one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. It starts with the internal battle that affects the rest of your
Yeah.
your world, your reality.
Yeah, that's why I won't even work with a percentage client if they're not interested in doing their own inner game. They
Hmm.
have to be interested in that because I know I'm not going to have much luck with them if they aren't interested in looking inside.
Yeah. It can't all be done on the surface level. In
No,
fact, probably very little of it
no.
can be done on the
I mean,
surface
I've
level.
worked with a lot of millionaires who can't talk to their wives.
Yeah. Sheesh. Well, thank you so much. And Gary, for any of our viewers out there that want to connect, collaborate, or even work with you, what would be the best way for them to get in touch?
Our website is riseleadershipgroup.com. They could also send me an email to Gary at riselg.com. Rise LG, which stands for Leadership Group, riselg.com. And then I'll give you later a phone number so that if somebody calls you, then you can pass it on.
Well, that's incredible. Yeah, I would appreciate that. To make it easy on everyone, I'll include Gary's information in the show notes just below this episode. Otherwise, I appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I always consider this an honor and a privilege.
Of course. Thanks so much, folks. We'll see you next time. Take care.